Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam,
And I'm Marcia.
and we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it. Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we're talking about the film I Was Monty's Double, which came out in 1958. The US title is Hell, Heaven, or Hoboken. It was directed by John Guillermin and written by Brian Forbes. It's based on the memoir I Was Monty's Double by M.E. Clifton James, which was published in 1954. The US title of the book was The Counterfeit General Montgomery, and the movie depicts an extraordinary but true part of Clifton James's wartime experience. He was part of a secret plan in the lead up to the D-Day landings, wherein he impersonated British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery to deceive the Germans. And for our casual history listeners, Field Marshal Montgomery led the British Eighth Army during the Western Desert Campaign in 1942 and 1943. He also commanded the Eighth Army throughout the Allied invasion of Sicily and Italy. And during the Normandy Campaign, he was in command of all the Allied ground forces. So, pretty important dude in the British military. What did you think of this movie?
I thought this was fantastic. I really enjoyed this movie. I also had a hard time believing that any of this was true, but it was. It's so funny. I really enjoyed this, and I will say thank you again to Ben for recommending this one. This is the last one featuring John Mills, which you seem to be obsessed with for some reason, but he was good in this, so thanks. I don't know, it was just really funny. That's my review. It's just really funny.
When I was watching it and I saw John Mills, I had to look up again when Ice Cold and Alex came out, and it came out the same year as this movie. So John Mills must have made them like back to back, which is kind of fun. Yeah, I also thought the movie was really funny. When I was reading the book, I was like, this guy's kind of a hoot, had a pretty good sense of humor. I don't know how objective he was. Like, this guy, M.E. Clifton James, was a huge Monty fan. You can understand why. Obviously, he got pretty close to him to be able to impersonate him. I had a good time watching the movie. I would say that the acting was pretty good. It's honestly even pretty true to life, except they kind of embellished it a bit towards the end. They threw in a little subplot that didn't happen, but yeah, I had a good time. I enjoyed.
It's just amazing to me that Mr. Clifton James actually played himself in this movie and also played Monty in this movie. It's just kind of meta in a way. And I was like, this guy must really also really like himself to be able to play himself and Monty in the same movie.
Well, I think he really had a hard time finding work after the war as an actor because that was his profession. He was an actor before the war, and he had actually served in World War I believe. He was an older guy. And when he joined the military, they put him in the pay corps. So he was basically like an accountant. And then after the war, he tried to go back to being an actor, but he had a tough time, I think, because of this whole resemblance to Monty thing. So he really could only find work sort of taking advantage of the fact that he resembled a very famous general.
I guess it's kind of the role of a lifetime, but then if it's only a short time that you get to be doing it, it becomes really sad because then how are you ever gonna surpass being Monty? There's no way to go from there, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
One question before we get into the plot. How does the funniness of the movie compare to the funniness of the book?
I honestly thought there were really funny parts in the book that I was hoping to see in the movie that were not in the movie. I would say if you read it, you would get a good chuckle.
And I remember you saying that on the back of the book it says something like these are important works of whatever history or whatever they said. And then that also the way the book was put together was not like an actual book, it was more like a manuscript. So was that at all cumbersome to read or was it just fine?
No, it was fine. It's pretty much, yeah, it says this work has been selected by scholars as being culturally important and is part of the knowledge base of civilization as we know it. This work was reproduced from the original artifact and remains as true to the original work as possible. So yeah, and it's in the public domain, so I guess they like photocopied an original manuscript, but like it's been edited and stuff. Like it was totally fine. It's just like a weird format.
It's almost just the blurb on that seems almost kind of tongue in cheek to say, look, this is really culturally significant. You have to read it. It's so funny.
Yeah, I guess, but I don't think it is. It's like it was made as a means of preserving a historical artifact. Like, it's really weird.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess a lot of this will have been really secretive because obviously no one was meant to find out that this Monty wasn't actually Monty. So until much later, I'm guessing this would have been top secret.
Oh, for sure, and there was even stuff that was left out of the book because at the time when it was published in 1954, it was still classified.
Right. Makes you think about what other crazy stuff he got up to as Monty. But
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
let's get into the plot. I'm excited. We start on the south coast of England. In the spring of 1944, we meet Intelligence Officer Major Harvey, played by John Nails, obviously, as he returns from a field mission only to be told by his colleague Colonel Logan, played by Cecil Parker, that they have a new project. They must determine how to trick the Germans into thinking that the Allies are not, in fact, landing at Normandy, despite all evidence to the contrary. So, we've talked about this before in other episodes. There were many, well, I say many, there were a couple different places considered for landing by the Allies, and Normandy ended up being the only logical one to do it in, I guess. I wonder, I started reading The Longest Day by Cornelius Ryan, who we both love. And even in that book, it starts with the lead up to Normandy, and the Germans don't know. They don't know exactly when the landing is gonna happen or where. So I guess it worked in some way to trick them. I didn't quite know that they got up to this kind of deception, to be honest.
Yeah, the sheer volume of shenanigans that ensue after this are like, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, you know?
Very true for this movie and book.
On a visit to the theater, Harvey spots actor M.E. Clifton James playing himself, appearing in character on stage as General Montgomery. He quickly realizes that they can use this likeness to their advantage. He's like, wait a minute. If we can convince the Germans that Monty is in a certain location, meanwhile, real Monty is over somewhere else, maybe we can trick them into thinking some major component of the invasion is going to happen where it's not actually going to happen. And this plan was actually conceived by Dudley Clark in real life. He is the officer who was the head of strategic deception for the British military in Cairo, and we talked about him in our SAS Rogue Hero episodes.
Go listen. What I thought was funny about this scene is that he goes to the theater because there's a secretary called Peggy that he misses because he's been on, I don't know, on a mission or on leave or something. And he's like, "Where's Peggy gone?" And his colleague is like, "She's gone." And then he goes to see her at the theater where she is with her fiance or husband at this point. And it's just a really funny scene. But then he totally forgets about it when he realizes that there's actually something they can use in there.
Yeah, for sure. This character is definitely the spurned romantic with the ladies.
Even with the secretary that replaces her, that he's not romantically into, but he's very charming with her too.
Mhm.
So Harvey and Logan set up a meeting with James and they begin to figure out the details of the plan. And they are joined by their new secretary, who I just mentioned, who is the ever helpful Mrs. Barry, played by Barbara Hicks.
Yeah, there's a scene on the train that cracked me up where another passenger comes into their carriage and they're talking about this plan, and the way they're describing it is so, like, weird and frightening that the other passenger promptly gets up and leaves the carriage because he has no context for what they're talking about.
Hilarious. I thought this was a spy at first. I was like, wait, why is he gone all of a sudden? Wasn't he just here? But there's quite a bit of that, to be honest, in this movie where I thought, wait, who's this guy? Why is he lurking? What are they doing?
Yeah, well, Clifton James in his book talks about how after they chose him for this plan or whatever, first of all, they didn't tell him the whole truth. They basically told him that the real Monty would be going to Africa and he would be staying in England, which was the reverse of what ended up happening because they were like, well, this way, if he spills it, then the Germans get the story we want them to get. But also, he would notice that, like, he'd be in a bar and someone friendly would be like, "Hey, like, what are you up to? Like, what's your name? Where are you from?" kinda thing, and it was just, like, clearly an MI5 agent trying to trip him up and to see if he would spill the beans.
Yeah, I do like that none of this feels acted because obviously this is what he went through. It's so wild.
Yeah, I did find that in the book, he comes across as, pretty witty and maybe a little charming, and I feel like we didn't get that as much in the movie. Like, the movie is less about him as a person and more about the broad shenanigans of this plot. I mean, obviously, the John Mills character is more the main character than the Clifton James character is.
I agree, and he also feels really, really insecure in the movie. I don't know if he was as insecure in the book, but just the entire time he's like this quiet, sort of soft spoken person. Unless he gets to be Monty, then he becomes Monty, obviously. But as a person playing himself, he plays himself as very insecure.
Yeah. I mean, he was, I think, because if you think about it, whether or not he pulls this off could either save the lives of thousands of men or it could not work. So, obviously, a lot of pressure, more pressure than being on an actual stage. But also, I think that in the book, he kind of hits his stride a lot earlier. Once he gets into the costume and he gets to see that other people really do perceive him as Monty, he's like, all right, like now I'm starting to feel it. And then he talks about how when he is flying between locations, when he's actually kind of started his mission, so to speak, he's like, "Yeah, I was nervous on the plane, and then the second I stepped out the door, I was Monty, and I forgot all about it."
It's like stepping on stage, I guess. You're nervous before you go on, and then once you're on, you're in it.
Yeah, exactly. James is able to secure 7 days of leave for a screen test. That's what they've told him that they want him for. But he soon learns from Harvey and Logan that he'll actually be impersonating General Montgomery in order to fool the Germans into thinking that the Allies might attack the south of France from North Africa. He's pretty iffy about this initially, as we just discussed, and throughout the process, really. He's worried that even if he gets Monty's mannerisms and voice right, he won't be able to successfully embody this famous confidence and effect on other people that Monty has.
In other portrayals of Monty, I haven't seen a whole lot, but the one I have seen most recently, and so have you, is in SAS for Heroes, where Monty is a tiny man. Like he's not a very tall man, but he's very commanding. So it's really funny to see. And he's got this sort of high pitched, gentle voice, but still it kind of projects this just commanding energy that it's funny to me that he's not a giant man.
So in real life, what had happened was one of the MI5 agents had seen this picture that had been printed of him in a newspaper. Some army photographer had taken a photo of him because they had noticed his likeness to Monty and made some little quip about, no, that's not Monty type thing, and just ran the picture and everyone forgot about it. So an MI5 agent saw that photo in the paper and was like, I feel like we could use this guy because they had developed this plan to use a Monty double based on this movie that had come out where an actor had played Monty and looked a lot like him. But when they met the real actor, he was like 6 feet something tall. And they're like, no one's gonna buy that. That's Monty because the real Monty is like 5'6". And then they found Clifton James, who was also kind of a little dude, and they were like, oh, this is perfect.
I can't wrap my head around this story. I'm gonna be just amazed by this the entire time we talk about it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
James quietly joins Monty's staff as a corporal in order to study him, and he's told that he's to be as close to him as possible, but he's very insecure still at this point, but he does follow Monty, around, and also while playing Monty in the movie. So he's playing himself and Monty in the same scene, and he follows him around on various outings, including the big D-Day rehearsal landings, and he scouts on everything from Monty's life to the sound of his voice, and he rehearses his upcoming itinerary.
I do wish they'd spent a bit more time on this because there were a few really funny passages from the book when he's trying to get the hang of Monty. But yeah, he did in real life, in fact, attend the D-Day rehearsal landings. And I believe in real life, they had him as an intelligence sergeant. And so all of Monty's drivers apparently were really suspicious of him. He had to kind of do like the James Bond thing of when they were like, why are you here? And he had to kind of be like, oh, it's classified type thing, you know?
Can't tell you. I did enjoy that the one bit they show you where he's really impersonating Monty or his mannerisms is when he wipes his nose, and the other guy's like, "What are you doing? I'm watching you."
Yeah. He's like, "How dare you impersonate Monty?" James is still uncertain about his abilities, but he gets to have a face-to-face meeting with Monty, which sets him straight, and it actually made me laugh because they clearly didn't include the actual meeting in the movie because they were like, "How are we going to film this guy talking to himself?" But they do include it in the book, and honestly, it's just like, how surreal would it be to go into the office of this famous general? You guys look almost exactly alike, so it's like looking into a mirror. You just have a whole ass chat about, like, his life and your life and what you have in common, and then you just leave. Wild. He resolves himself, he can do it, so he leaves soon afterward for Gibraltar, which is will be the first stop on his deception tour, and Harvey will accompany him as a brigadier.
I do like this relationship between Jimmy or James and Harvey because they're just so chummy together. It's like boys on a trip.
Yeah, it's cute. This is also the part this is a quote from real life. When James was about to proceed on his mission, he was still getting paid his regular pay. And he was an officer, so he was making some coin, but they had asked for danger pay on his behalf and he was turned down. And then Monty personally intervened, supposedly, and said, "If James is good enough to wear my uniform, he's good enough to draw my pay."
Yeah, it made me laugh in the movie because they asked James how much that would be, and he's like, "Well, I don't know." And then they say, "Well, don't you work for the Pay Corps?"
Yeah, that conversation straight from real life. He's like, "I've never done a general's pay before. How would I know this?" This made me laugh because throughout the book, Clifton James talks about how prepared MI5 is for any eventuality. So it's pretty rare that you would have to, improvise because MI5's whole way of doing things is instead of you having to figure out a way out of the situation, we're going to try and make sure the situation never arises. So he talks about how, they've got everything ready to go. And then essentially on the eve of him leaving, they realize that Clifton James is missing a finger on his right hand because he was wounded in World War One, and it's not like a sneaky finger, it's like his middle finger. And obviously, like, Monty salutes, so people are gonna see his hand. So at the very last minute, they developed this homemade prosthetic that they, like, strap to his hand, and they're like, "Well, hopefully it looks convincing from far away."
Wish they had included that in the movie. That would have been so funny.
I know, it really it really cracked me up, but I guess they didn't really notice because Monty had this thing where when he was walking around, he would always have his hands clasped behind his back, and so Clifton James would
Mm.
always do that on all of their Monty rehearsals, so they didn't see his hands too much.
And he also didn't think, maybe I should tell them.
Yeah, I guess he was also used to I think he had also become accustomed to kind of hiding it, like, he always had that hand in his pocket and stuff, and so I think maybe he even forgot.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to remember if I ever had a situation where I just forgot I had a disability. I'm sure I did. Harvey and James arrive in Gibraltar. During a minor mishap or two, James starts to get into the role, like he's getting kind of comfortable being Monty. They arrive at the home of the governor, played by Michael Hordern, who's in the know about the plot, but nevertheless must greet his old friend Monty because they've met to make it convincing for onlookers. I thought this was really funny because this guy's just constantly in awe of James and trying not to show it.
Yeah, and this is true to real life too. The governor was so excited to get to, act, and they get into a private room, him and Clifton James, and he's like, "How did I do? Did I pull it off?" And Clifton James like, "No, you're great, you're great."
It almost makes you forget the stakes, doesn't it? Like, you're just like, oh, this is so cool, but at the same time, there are like millions of lives at stake.
Right, yeah. There's a scene in the book where Clifton James is sitting in his room at the governor's house, and I guess Monty's old Batman, like how in the British Army, like all the officers have a guy who schleps all their shit and everything. So anyway, Monty's old Batman was like, "Oh, Monty's in town. I want to serve him. Like I specifically want to be on like Monty detail." And so they obviously let him because they thought it was real Monty. And then so when he came into the room with Clifton James's breakfast, Clifton James sort of pretended that he was busy doing paperwork and stuff and, like, didn't really acknowledge the guy or anything like that, and then he's like, "Wow, That guy probably thought, Monty, my old boss, is a real asshole."
Just having to fool everybody that you ever knew, even on the good side, is just what a huge undertaking.
Another thing that happened at the very last minute was that Clifton James was like, "What does Monty eat?" And they were like, "What do you mean, what does he eat?" And he's like, "Well, I don't like if there's something if he, like, hates broccoli, I don't wanna be, like, going to town on broccoli or whatever, like, it has to be convincing." So I guess somebody called Monty and was like, "Hey, what do you eat?" And he was like, "What do you mean, what do I eat?" And so, yeah, and then it turned out that he didn't eat I think it was, like, beef or fish, and he doesn't take sugar or milk in his porridge. Basically like a vegetarian, and so Clifton James was like, "Well, good thing I knew that and didn't just go to town on a steak or whatever," you know?
Yeah, I did like that they included the not smoking and not drinking bit quite obviously in the several scenes in the movie. But
Yeah,
to be honest, the steak one would have been so much funnier.
right? Yeah, Clifton James was, a guy who enjoyed some drink, and he was a smoker like a lot of men of the era, and Monty didn't do either of those things. Supposedly I read a couple of different reasons why Monty was teetotal. In one place, I read that when he was a kid, he got caught smoking and he got in trouble and he sort of like made a promise that he would never do it. In another place, I read that I guess he was shot in the lung during World War I, and it kind of gave him some like not health problems that impacted his day to day, but sufficiently that he didn't smoke. So I don't know the real reason, but yeah, the guy never did any of that stuff. And he also didn't even like people to smoke around him.
Which they also reminded us of in the movie. They're like, nobody smoke in this room. Although he does say at some point to his guests later on, I'm not going to take any, but go ahead.
Yeah. The governor invites a local businessman, Carl Nielsen, played by Marius Goring, to dinner, knowing that Nielsen is a spy and will likely pass the word of Monty's presence in Gibraltar back to Berlin. The dinner gets bumpy, though, because they soon realize that Nielsen has met the real Montgomery before, so they're going to have to blag their way through, but they seem to pull it off all right.
I enjoyed when James tried to suss out how they met each other really carefully so he could then talk along with this guy. But I don't know if they pulled it off really because he seemed kind of suspicious. But also, there's another spy in a couple scenes before this, a couple times. There's another guy on the lookout or something for him. And that never gets driven home. It's so confusing.
Yeah. I gather that in real life, there was no dinner with Nielsen or anything like that, but James was in his room, and he had just gotten there, and he looked up on the roof opposite, and there was just a guy, and at first he was like, "Oh, like, is that a sniper?" And he sort of went through the motions of, like, "What should I do if it is a sniper?" And then he realized that it was just a guy, like, watching him.
Hmm.
And so, like, pretty immediately, he was being followed around by actual enemy spies who were trying to determine if, he was legit. And he did have a deliberate stroll around the gardens of the governor's mansion because the governor knew that these two Spanish agents were meant to come by the house and he knew that they were spies. So he's like, let's conveniently time it that, like, you and me are in the garden walking around. And whenever they knew that enemy agents were present, whether it was these two Spanish guys or like a workman at the governor's house or someone at the airport, James would just make stuff up. Like he would talk loudly about nonsense plans for the invasion. So he would be like, yes, the War Council has agreed that Plan 303 will go ahead. So make sure that you do what we discussed or whatever, just stuff like that.
Africa.
Also, the thing where in the movie, the German businessman asks for Monty's autograph to try and trip him up because obviously Clifton James would have different writing. And that was one of the things that MI5 planned for. When he gets off the plane in North Africa in the book, the driver is actually an American woman, a female member of the armed forces. And so MI5 was like, oh, these American women are bold as brass. They'll ask for an autograph from anybody. So you got to be prepared with these like signed headshots.
They have to move on to the next location and they encounter German fighters on their flight, followed by the risk of enemy agents on the road. Harvey and James arrive safely at their destination in North Africa, where of course they have to keep up the route. They embark on a whistle stop tour for Monty, quote unquote, to inspect and address the troops, which goes so well that more stops are added. There's one brief moment of danger when one of the cars in our convoy runs over a mine, thankfully not theirs.
Yeah. In real life, there are much fewer stops. MI5 did not want Monty's presence to be an open secret because they feared that if it was too obvious, the Germans would sense that something was kind of janky about it. And so they tried to keep it under wraps as much as possible, but they deliberately allowed known enemy agents to quote unquote accidentally slip through the net.
Yeah. In the movie, it feels kind of like he's doing a victory tour. Like, we're in the middle of the war, but he's just celebrating his troops.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, they did zhuzh up the danger in certain parts of this movie to make it more exciting, and I don't blame them for doing that. It's fun.
Yeah, it's meant to be a funny movie, and you need some good old adventures in a funny movie, I think, if
Yeah.
it's gonna do well.
James's time as Monty is coming to an end, and he must lie low until the Normandy landings are over because then there will be no more need for the Germans to believe that Monty is somewhere else. He's been so good at his role, though, that some German commandos arrive and kidnap him, believing him to be the real Monty. He is taken back to German occupied territory and interrogated.
Imagine being so good at your job that they just think you're real. So I take it this did not happen in real life, did it?
No, the kidnapping did not happen in real life. That was the biggest embellishment from real life to movie, I would say.
It's fun though. We see a submarine, I think, out where he is before they come to get him. And I enjoyed that because they talk about that. I say they. In the Cornelius Ryan book, there's a big part about submarines off the Normandy coast, just watching the coast the entire time, which I thought was funny to then see it in a movie like this.
Yeah, definitely. In real life, the period immediately after acting as Monty was kind of an anticlimax for Clifton James, the role of a lifetime, and then it was over. And I do think if this movie were made today, it'd be more of a movie about him as a person, perhaps, than a movie about, the adventure and all of the different
Mm.
characters populating it. Because I think it could have something real to say about what it's like to be somebody the way he's wanted to be all his life. He was an actor, he was, constantly trying to find work. And then to have that taken away from you and how it feels to kind of go through that letdown.
Yeah, and to have real purpose to your life too. Like, it's not just any role, it's a life-saving thing that you're doing. And
Yeah.
yeah, it would be so interesting to have like the mental side of that in a movie, in like a drama maybe, or maybe even like a comedy but with bits of drama in it. I think it would work really well. But even though I guess the kidnapping was not real, but it is in this movie, so Harvey realizes that this has happened. And he comes to the rescue, which I enjoyed. And he succeeds in taking over the boat that the Germans are expecting to meet. He's in like a dinghy and he disappears behind some rocks and kills the Germans and get in the boat. And then they do a long walk on the beach. There's another officer with him and they walk. They're dressed up as the Germans and they walk toward them to the actual Germans on the beach. And it's very tense. It's like this is the tensest scene of the entire movie.
Yep. And then when they encounter them, Harvey manages to kill them all. And at first, he's worried that he may have accidentally killed Clifton James, but all is well. He survives.
Yay!
And then Harvey and James return to England, having been told that the deception, the Monty's double deception, caused the Germans to keep some troops in reserve far from Normandy. So they probably did save a bunch of lives. And when they get home, they take in a newsreel about the successful D-Day landings.
Yeah, I thought the ending was kind of meh. Like, it felt kind of sudden to me.
Yeah, it was weird to me because I was watching the kidnapping and I checked the time remaining on the movie just to see, and there was only like 13 minutes left or something. And I was like, how are they going to wrap this up?
The answer is they don't really. It just ends.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's not really a big thinker of a movie, you know?
No. No. I bet. Just imagine if that is your life. How the fuck are you going to get back to normal life?
I know. And Clifton James went back to the Pay Corps. And then when he left the army, like I said, he tried to get back into acting, but he had a really tough time. I think he was on benefits for a little while. So yeah, definitely a huge, you're critical to the war effort, you're really needed, and then all of a sudden you're not.
Yeah. Thanks for your service. Bye. I guess in a way that makes the ending of the movie kind of fitting because it would have ended like that just as suddenly for James as it did for us in the movie. So I guess that's fitting.
I would have liked, kind of in keeping with what I was saying before about maybe getting a bit more of Clifton James as a main character and his emotional journey. It would
Yeah,
have been nice to get a bit more resolution, see what it was like for him to go back to his job and that kind of stuff.
I agree. I would have liked that too. We have some notes, or I should say, you have some notes. You did all the hard work for this one.
Well, we take turns. It's fine. The Monty's double deception was known as Operation Copperhead, and it was part of a broader intelligence plot called Operation Bodyguard. The goal of this plan was to try and trick the Germans about the true goal of the mass buildup of troops in the south of England by planting credible intelligence that the invasion might occur in any number of other places, including Norway, the south of France, and the Balkans. So, obviously, in the lead up to D Day, the Allies were doing rehearsals. They had, thousands and thousands of guys and material in the south of England. And so, of course, the Germans knew that something was coming. So, the idea is to catch them on the back foot as much as possible. And the largest deception that formed a part of Operation Bodyguard included the creation of a fake American army that was supposedly going to land at Pas de Calais, which is north of Normandy. And this was one of the ones that the Germans supposedly believed the most,
Sounds like a Dudley Clark kind of thing to do. Just a fake army. There you
right?
go.
The result of the overall operation was that the Germans did believe some of the deceptions, which resulted in them delaying reinforcements after the Normandy landings. Hitler didn't redeploy troops from Calais and other areas for almost 7 weeks, which was obviously really helpful to the Allies. It's hard to say how much of a part Operation Copperhead specifically actually played, though Monty's supposed presence in North Africa was believed by Axis agents on the ground and relayed to Berlin. There was some sense that the Germans were like, okay, Monty's in Africa, but we still kind of think this is a trick. We just kind of can't figure out why. And also, there were so many conflicting pieces of intelligence flying around at this time with varying levels of possible authenticity that the Germans just couldn't prioritize them all. So they were like, yeah, we think Monty's in North Africa, but we don't, we have to kind of focus our resources on the rumors that that we actually can do something about, that we believe more thoroughly.
Too many rumors, guys.
Yeah. Nevertheless, when Clifton James died on the 18th anniversary of VE Day in 1963, General Montgomery said he performed a very useful purpose at a very dark time of the war. What he did completely fooled the Germans.
How lovely to get that from General Montgomery. Especially, I don't know if he had a family or not, like a wife or a daughter, but
Yeah,
especially,
Clifton James had a wife and 2 kids, I believe.
yeah, how nice for them to get that from the Montgomery about their husband and father.
Yeah, definitely. His wife appears in the book a little bit too. She initially comes down to London with him when he still thinks that he's going to be making propaganda movies instead of,
Hmm.
being Monty's double. And the MI5 guys are like, you got to get rid of your wife. You also can't tell her the truth. And you get this kind of lovely little window into their relationship because she immediately knows that he's lying. And she's like trying to ferret information out of him, but he can't even really tell her that he's doing intelligence work. So he's like, yeah, I'm on a special pay corps job. It's like, it's really boring. Like, you wouldn't want to hear the details. And
She's
she's like,
like,
I know you're
bullshit!
lying to me. Yeah. And then she does end up going home. And then he's not allowed to write to her at all while he's on this job. And he feels terrible about it. So yeah, it's really sweet. And it would have actually been kind of cool to see her in the movie. But I was glad that we had the character of Mrs. Baring. We did actually get a female character with something to do. So that was kind of fun.
And I like Mrs. Barron too. She kept shit running. All these men are just kind of confused, and she's got like what did she do? She had like the travel arrangement, and everything was happening because of her. I liked it.
Yeah, she was a nuts and bolts lady for sure.
Yeah. I wonder if the Germans did anything similar.
I know they did some deception-y stuff because I read that book by Ben McIntyre about Agent Zigzag, and he was
Huh.
like this guy who was like almost like a quadruple agent. Like, he was a British guy who became a German spy, and then the Germans sent him back to England to, like, lie about a bunch of stuff, and then the British caught wind, and they were like, "Oh, well, actually, now you're a double agent," and then he went back to Germany and he was like, "Actually, I'm a double agent for the British." So, then he became, like, a triple agent. Anyway, but I know that, like, part of his job was to, like, lie about like, make up rumors about, this and that and try and spread them around.
But yeah, I enjoyed this so much. We should rate this movie, but before we do, I would like to remind you that you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and please rate us 5 stars. It's been a while since we had any ratings, and I'm feeling kind of sad about it, so please do. You can send this episode to a friend. I don't know what happens if you do. Sam, any thoughts?
Every time you send this episode to a friend,
You fool another German. Well done.
you know what's funny? I bet the word doppelganger is German.
It is. It is German. Well done. Anyway, what should we rate this movie?
How many full Monties out of 10 would you rate this movie?
Hmm. I would rate this movie 8.5 for Monty's out of 10. I just had a really good time watching this movie. I thought it was really funny. I thought it was almost too funny to be true. But like you said, truth is stranger than fiction, and it really was. I thought the acting was charming by everybody involved. And it's one of those old-timey movies that doesn't feel very slow. Like, the pacing was really good in this movie, so I liked everything about it. I have no complaints. How about you?
Yeah, I'm charmed by the fact that they made a movie based on Clifton James's book and then let him play himself and let him play Field Marshal Montgomery. It's really, I got a kick out of it. I really thought the book was a hoot. I had a great time reading it. I flew through it. I mean, it's not very long, it's less than 200 pages. As we said, I think I would have liked it a bit more if we had maybe gotten some more of some, like, emotional arc or interior life for some of the characters. And they did obviously, make the plot line a bit more larger than life than it actually was. And I do think the real story is sufficiently wild on its own. But I had a great time watching it, and I knew I think I watched it first, and I sent you a message, and I was like, "Yeah, I think you're gonna enjoy it." But yeah, I would recommend both the movie and the book. And oh my god, I didn't even rate it. I would give it, mm, I'll give it 7.5 full Monties out of 10.
It should be more, really. I'll stop being annoying. No, that was fun. I really enjoyed it. I wonder what our audience thinks. Have you guys ever heard of this story before? I certainly hadn't. I didn't know this was a thing because it's so wild. But then it is the British, so you can kind of expect them to do something silly like this.
Well, when I first heard that it was called I Was Monty's Double, I almost thought that maybe there were some Monty decoys in place so that people wouldn't try and assassinate Monty. It's like, well, maybe when Monty's going to a certain location, there's a decoy in another car to prevent him from being assassinated. Like, that's what I thought the story would be about. But no, it was much crazier than that.
Yeah. Are you reading anything now that you finished I Was Monty's Double?
Yeah, I am reading Story of the Trapp Family Singers by Maria von Trapp because The Sound of Music is a World War II movie, so stay tuned for that.
I am so excited to be covering The Sound of Music on this podcast.
I know, right?
I love The Sound of Music. I can sing every song from start to finish right now, but I shall not.
We should release a special side episode where you just sing all of the songs front to back.
It's a special musical episode. You know how to do those in all those popular TV shows?
Yeah,
Don't you wish Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a World War II episode and also a musical?
yeah, I would love that. That would be perfect. The World War II episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that is also a musical.
I promise everybody I'm not drunk. I'm also still reading the same book, so I'm not gonna repeat myself. I guess that's it for this week. Thank you everybody for listening. You can follow us wherever you get your podcast. Please follow us on Spotify and Apple and all those fancy platforms. And you can follow us on Instagram if you would like to get some extra reels every week at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast. And surprisingly, our website is also called rosieTheReviewer.com, so you can go there if you want more information. about lots of stuff. So please do, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.